Welcome to Tyrompers No Limit Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Tyrompers No Limit Podcast, episode 96. You guys are in for a treat on this one. I'm so excited to learn from this amazing woman. This is Carilyn Johnson. She's a four-time ultra runner for Team USA, collecting multiple gold medals, huge advocate and voice of reason for women's sports, and someone that I've learned a lot on the platform from the last couple weeks. Super grateful to have you on. Welcome to the pod. How you doing today?
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to platform women's sports here. So thank you.
Thank you. It's a topic near and dear to my heart. As you know, my wife is a swimmer. My daughter, have a young daughter that's 8.5. And just to be honest, all the things that I feel like we've fought for equality over the last, however many decades is kind of eroding right before us. But before we hop in, can you maybe tell people a little bit who you are, what you're about, sort of intro yourself?
Well, so you kind of gave a really nice introduction, and I appreciate that very much. So I've always been an athlete. I was a competitive swimmer growing up and transitioned to running later in life. I was around during the doping scandals of the 70s with swimming. So I was very much influenced by what can happen if one group has an unfair advantage and how it will really impact later generations. A lot of people quit swimming. A lot of women and girls quit swimming during that time because they didn't feel like it was a level playing field. So I was very much influenced by that a lot. I'm a huge fan of Sharon Davies out of the UK. She really is very on this saving women's sports. So competitive swimmer, went to college, went to law school, and then really focused in law school on civil rights, and went from law school to being a prosecutor, and then focused on the civil rights situations within the government, and then went into legislative work and was a legislative attorney. So that's really been my focus. And so I find it incredibly interesting after then, semi-retiring from law, kept my license, but retired from actually practicing to raise children and become a professional runner, to now be circling back, having to readdress this. That has been kind of my big push. I can't believe that stuff that we fought for decades, for women to just have, at least a level playing field, and we're refighting that again. It's shocking to me, frankly. So that's why I'm all in on this.
That's awesome. Okay, number one, I gotta say, did you say the 70s?
Yes. So
this is a reason to exercise, number one, because you look 45,
Well, I very much appreciate that. Not 45, so I do appreciate that. But I was I wasn't actually like fully in the game in the 70s. I just was, we watched the Olympics, and I was very aware of what was happening. And it did have a really big chilling effect on girls swimming when I was really getting heavily into it.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So, to be honest, I learned about this issue maybe 5-6 years ago when Zuby, who's really prominent on Twitter, did a kind of a spoof on it and said, "Hey, I'm identifying as a woman. I'm going to break the deadlift record."
Yes.
I thought, haha, that's kind of funny. South Park did some things on it. And if I'm very honest, I just thought, okay, as a species, we're smart enough to understand this isn't going to work. Maybe we're going to try this for a year or two, and then the common sense is going to win out.
Yes.
Why do you believe that half the population to this point either turns a blind eye, or they're pushing this stuff on us, and they're really taking away women's sports? I mean, there's no other way to say it. 3 girls got injured last week. You posted a list that I ran down, and all the medals that women have not been able to win, or they haven't been able to make teams. It's tragic. And these girls practice their whole lives leading up to this, and now it's just stolen from them. Why do you think this is happening? Is there a bigger agenda? Or I just love your thoughts on it.
I've actually, so I've pondered that myself. I'm embarrassed to say I wasn't really aware of how kind of deep this had gone until, and I've told this story several times on X, but I kind of had it in my peripheral vision, that something was amiss. But like you, I thought, this is a blip on the radar. I mean, nobody with rational thinking is thinking that women are somehow just magically going to, grow to 6'2" and have, you know, a wingspan like a male swimmer, or, you know, muscle to fat ratio, VO2 max. So it didn't really like become a big issue for me. And I was actually going to physical therapy. It was physio. I get regular physio every week to stay able to, you know, do what I do. And I was going through SiriusXM, and I heard Megan Kelly as I'm, you know, going through, and I hear her say something about women's sports. And so I pause, and it's Inga Thompson, who was a professional cyclist. And she's talking about how she had been really, you know, pushed aside and silenced for speaking out. And she, you know, anyway, I could not get out of my car. I missed 45 minutes of my physio appointment because I sat in my car and I thought, what is happening? Like, this is going on around the world, that men are suddenly identifying into women's sports, and rational people are going, well, prove to us that they don't have an advantage. And I'm thinking, you know, the whole reason we have women's sports is because anybody can see that 99% of the time a male is going to have an advantage if they're, you know, competing at the same level. So I started paying attention, and then, you know, the Riley Gaines situation happened in San Francisco, and we were driving home from my husband's parents' house in San Angelo, Texas. So it's a very long, desolate drive back to El Paso, and I just could not stop refreshing. I was like, this is insane to me. So, you know, all the way around to that, I had pretty much bowed out of any sort of professional sporting environment. Like, once I was done competing for Team USA, I really took on more of a, let me help other younger women excel in ultra running. That was sort of my kind of platform, while, you know, doing my law stuff. As far as social media, I was, you know, talking to people on Twitter about social media. I mean, about ultra running. I was posting pictures of what I ate and how far I ran. Like,
Yeah.
I had no political anything happening. But once I started really watching that, I thought this could really be the end of women's sports. Because the reality of it is, even if we train at the same level, there will always be an anomaly. There's always going to be a really fantastic woman who can beat a lot of the men. But we're not talking about that, you know, very small percentage. We're talking about across the board, women and girls have a separate category for a reason.
Right.
And, you know, first and foremost, we recognize, you know, parity, as far as we need to be able to play in our own category so that we can excel with the bodies we were given. Secondly, though, is, you know, what you were alluding to earlier with those 3 girls getting hurt in that game. There's just an injury issue. You know, we've had women and girls getting seriously injured because they're playing against men, and people think that that's all fine and they're being kind. Who are they being kind to? I'm not exactly sure where the be kind message came from, because it sure is not to women or girls.
Yeah, and you made a great point too. Did you get a chance to listen to the Riley Gaines podcast on Joe Rogan here a week ago?
I did. I'm a huge fan. I think she has done, you know, I'm amazed. Like, she's in her 20s. I wish I had that much clarity and backbone that she has, because she has gotten an unbelievable amount of grief for standing up for something that should be a basic common sense issue.
Yeah, the gut-wrenching thing to me, and you alluded to a little bit, was how they tried to silence her and all the other female athletes. And you know, she tied Leah Thompson, or whatever you want to say, right? The guy who's, you know, what is she, 5'7", and he's 6'2", and she actually tied him. He was the 360th ranked male swimmer. Now all of a sudden he's number 1, dominating multiple categories, right, in multiple events. And she tied him, and even then they walked up to her and said, we're giving him the trophy. You have to step in the background. And to me, that's so offensive. Like, when she talked about her training, what she did for years and decades to put herself in that spot. And now all of a sudden we're just saying, well, you don't get to maybe go to the Olympics, or you don't get to win a gold medal, or you don't get to compete at this level. And I even think of girls that just train and play high school basketball. This doesn't even have to be elite levels, but like in high school, it's a popular thing to be on the team and feel like you're a part of the team. And now maybe somebody doesn't get a spot on that team just because some, like, and again, who is that kind to? I
Right.
don't understand who we're trying to protect there. I'm really lost on some of this stuff. And, I feel like if 20 years ago we had just mentioned to anybody on the street, hey, do you think it's fair if a biological male competes in women's sports? 100% of people we would have interviewed, and if we had a sample of 1 million people, I
Yeah.
literally feel like 1 million out of 1 million would have been like, yeah, that's clearly not fair. It's two different categories, right?
Right. Right. And that, I think that that's what's so kind of disheartening to me, is that that's why I don't believe this is actually about a sports equity issue. I think there's something else there, because I don't think anyone who's really thinking rationally truly believes that a 14-year-old girl is as competitive physiologically. Like, she's going to be as mentally competitive and training as hard. But to say that a boy, that they're equal in the pool, it makes no sense to me. I mean, when I again, I posted this, but when I was training as a swimmer, we started together at 5 or 6. There was a cohort of us, and we were trained exactly the same coaches. We were in combined lanes. Everything was the same. When the girls hit puberty, which was often before the boys, our bodies changed significantly. And then the boys changed, and suddenly those exact same workouts were not executed the same. And it wasn't a case of we weren't trying hard enough, which is one of those things I get all the time. Just try harder. It's like, biology is great. Biology is fantastic. And denying this out of some sort of, women need to do better is so regressive to me. Like, the entire reason we had Title IX, the reason we had federal protection for women's sports, was because prior to Title IX, women were not able to compete in sports in the male category. So, you'd get one or two that, could do it, but the rest of the women and girls were not able to compete in those categories.
Yeah, and we're just sitting on the sidelines with no chance to do anything. And we're seeing that happen in real time today. I agree with you. There's got to be some bigger thing to this, because it doesn't make any logical sense to most people, but yet most people won't say anything. And I go back to the example of the 3 girls getting hurt last week. And I followed that story pretty close. The ADs came out and said, oh, we think it's a wonderful thing. It's the coach. Nobody spoke up. If I'm a dad in the stands, like, I'm not going to be allowing my daughter to, I don't know. And this is where I've learned from you a little bit, and I'd love your take on this, because I always thought, the girls just shouldn't compete. They should sit out. But almost what that does then again, and I've learned this from you, is now we're punishing the girls again for something they didn't do. So, then I had the joke, kind of, but not really. I'm like, if maybe somebody's going to identify and try and play against my daughter, maybe I'm going to identify as a teenage girl and go compete against them. I said it as a joke, but it's not out of the realm of possibility, right? Like, and so what do you kind of think? Where do we need to go? What should women do? What can I do? What can we all do to say, this is common sense, we need to take this back?
Well, and I think you're raising some really good points there, in that we are, there is a little bit of a divide, and I get pushed back on a lot, because I absolutely, I defend the girls. That is my goal. My children are in their 20s, and my job at this point in my life is to defend those coming behind me. I'm not trying to, I can't even think of the phrase, but I'm really concerned about those coming behind me. And I think that our job as the adults in the room, as the people who came before, the people that have the benefit of having equal opportunity in sport, our job is to defend those girls. And telling a 16-year-old girl that she should risk her coach's life, her entire team's scholarship opportunities, that, we've seen this. We've seen teams getting banned from league play. We've seen coaches getting fired. We've seen school districts, like the one that absolutely still shocks me is the entire school was banned when they refused to play, when they realized what was happening. There was a boy playing on the girls' opposing team, and they refused to play. The entire school was banned from every extracurricular activity. That means the band kids, the math kids, the kids doing UIL, like any form of extracurricular, the entire school's banned. So if your kid is the kid that is relying on the state math championship because his scholarship to wherever is dependent on that, and he's banned from doing it because some 16-year-old girl chose not to play, like, I don't care. I just don't care who you are. We're requiring minors to put up a protest that we as adults would not do. And we're kidding ourselves if we think that we would. So I really focus on, we've got to be the ones. We have to show up at those meets. We have to be the ones talking to the school boards. We have to be the ones writing the letters. I spend a lot of time on my platform writing open letters to politicians because I think that that's our job. We're the adults in the room. And especially those that have benefited from sport. We need to be at the forefront of this. Now, it is a little different when we get into pro athletes. And I really do understand. And I am like, I can't tell you how incredibly great I think it is that people like, Riley Gaines and Seth Dillon, I think, is the other person. I think they're offering to match any type of prize won by somebody if they choose to not compete. I think that's amazing. And I do support that. But I also am sympathetic that we're asking of people to do things that ruin their livelihood that nobody else is willing to do. So,
and things they love doing, they've trained their whole lives to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking if you really think about it in that term, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I ask you this too? And this is what has blown my mind on this whole thing is where are the feminists? Like where is that movement? Because this is to me one of the most regressive things. And we're even seeing it, this spills over from sports to guys committing crimes and getting sentenced to male prisons. And now guess what? Yeah. And we've seen time and time again, I could cite a dozen or more examples of then these guys go, and now we're seeing women being raped in women's prisons by biological males. We're seeing, there was a story that came out from a sorority that wanted to ban a biological male from being in their sorority because he was creeping them out, walking around, asking them to change you're seeing these stories over and over again. And it's just like, where are the feminists protecting women? And that's, I come from, my wife's a PhD and she's smart and strong. And my daughter, I want her to be the same, and it's just, I don't understand the outrage and where the other women are. And why do you think so many are being silenced and threatened? And it's, and where does this go?
Well, so, kind of back to so that sorority, Kappa Kappa Gamma, is my sorority. And I actually resigned in, protest to that. And it's amazing how many people kind of push back on me for that. And I think that women are getting so much grief from a certain percentage of the population, that they're somehow not being kind. And as you know, probably, from your wife and being a dad daughter, women and girls are that's like the mantra, be kind, be kind, be kind, often to our detriment. So I think that's A. And then I just posted, 3 hours ago, or, it was actually yesterday and then reposted today. I think that the feminists, quote unquote, and I don't even know how we define that anymore because it's, they talk about first wave, second wave, third wave. I don't even know, what that means exactly, but women, we are speaking out. The problem is, up until recently, not a single social media platform would even allow women to post. So right now, X is the only one who is, quote unquote, not censoring women for saying, women are women. And,
A wild statement.
again, crazy.
Yeah.
But, Instagram, TikTok, any other social media platform, they're still censoring women. They're still banning their accounts or suspending their accounts. And Twitter, that's what we were having the conversation about this morning on X, was there still women getting shadow banned for saying trans women are not women, trans women are men. Or Save Women's Sports, or talking about the WPATH files or whatever, they're still getting shadow banned. And then you move from social media, which, theoretically is a kind of, smaller or less important pool as far as public debate. Every single media story that's covered is either not covered at all, or it's framed as some poor marginalized man who is not allowed to express his true identity, and a bigoted woman who said, please don't ruin sports, or please don't put men in prisons, or, women don't want to be appropriated. And so as long as the narrative is that, as long as the mainstream media is allowed to consistently push a trans agenda as being the marginalized group and women are somehow the oppressor in this, women are speaking out. We're on top of buildings, yes, but if we are not allowed to speak, or if every article's written, every news story is,
yeah, you're right,
put forth like we're somehow doing something bad, average people that don't care are not going to believe us.
I appreciate that perspective, and that makes a lot of sense to me. That kind of clicks for me right now as you're speaking on, you say what you want about COVID, but there was a large group of people that were not for some of the lockdowns and all the restrictions, and they just weren't allowed to speak. And so you never really got to hear that viewpoint because they were banned. And so that is why I think it's so important that we're allowed to freely speak and have public debate and have civil conversations and learn. I mean, I've learned just from you. Whereas we couldn't have had this conversation a few years ago before Elon bought Twitter. That's for sure. You would have been kicked off. There's no doubt, right?
Right.
So that is very important.
And I have been shadow banned several times. And, I really, really, really make a concerted effort. I get called names all the time. I get death threats and all the things. And I really, really try never to respond. But I'll get shadow banned for saying something like, I believe that boys and girls sports is unethical, and I'll get shadow banned for that. And someone can then respond to me and call me a bigot, a Nazi, every whatever, and they want me to die. And their account, there's nothing. So it's still happening. It's just happening less. But I think that people who believe that A, women are not speaking out, or B, that the majority of people support this, are being misled.
I agree with you.
This information is absolutely being funneled through a filter. It's not real.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you made right there. And I think you're right. I think, again, if we probably put 90% of where we're at right now, we would all probably agree on this, but there's some kind of, you said, filter at the top that's not allowing us to all unite, which is a bigger part of the system.
Right.
Yeah. And, and I just say this too, and I'd like to say this, is like, I managed a bank for a few years before I do what I do now. And I had 2 different clients that I really liked that were transitioning from female to male. You know what I did every day when they came in? I gave them a fist bump, said, how can I help you? I was kind. Like, I could care less. When you're an adult, if you want to do what you want, I could care less.
Right.
I do think what we sort of conflate in there is kindness, but it has to come at the cost of somebody else. If you want to go do what you want to do and go play in a pickup league in the YMCA, and I don't care about that. I really don't. I hope you live a great and a happy life. My problem is when you're hurting females in this category, right? And I think that's where the big difference comes in.
Right. And that's so well said. I think that's exactly the thing. And one of the big, you spend a lot of time in law school discussing, there are very few cases where it's a clean decision. Somebody behaved badly and somebody was completely innocent and everyone comes to agreement. There's always, different circumstances that contribute to the end result. And I'm with you. When all of this started, probably one of the reasons I wasn't really paying that much attention was I didn't really care. It's like, it's like if you want to identify as something else, you know, whatever,
Knock
civil
yourself
liberties.
out.
I'm not, yeah, it's
Yeah.
all fine. And then I kind of, really got into the sports center because I realized women were actually being shut down, kicked off teams, losing medals, losing opportunities. And there was an entire group of people going, well, it's all good as long as these men feel good about themselves. And I was like, what? And then from there, I just slowly over time started seeing that um, if it was just about being kind and if it was about just accepting that people want to behave in a way that is autonomous, that they want to self-identify and they want to behave however they want to behave, that would be one thing. But that is not what this is. We just keep seeing cases where the word woman is getting obliterated. We are now, I'm not even going to say all the things because half the things are like offensive, not even just not woman, but like I wouldn't even say that to somebody. But anyway, vagina havers or bonus hole havers or whatever. And it's like these are being put into legal documents, these are being put into medical journals. And it's like at some point, and this is kind of where I've come down with this. I think that if we as a society have decided that people cannot appropriate other groups' identities for their own benefit, and that's the key, for their own benefit. If they cannot appropriate someone else's identity for their own benefit, then women should not have to sit by and let men, whatever their reason is, appropriate us for their benefit.
Well said.
And so I don't see why this is different. Now, again, there's, a whole different conversation about, what constitute appropriation, that kind of thing. But I think if you decided that you're a woman and you get every benefit of being a woman, but you also get every benefit of being a man, you're appropriating.
Yeah. And what would be the counter argument to that? Because I've never heard one. And when I've tried to have, because I have some pretty woke people, I've got a couple 100,000 people that follow you. You have people that are
Right.
And when I try and have conversations and very clearly lay these things out, I just get called phobic and not alt-right and it's like, dude, I actually like was pretty left-leaning voting for most of, like I was fist bumping
Same.
when Barack Obama got elected the first time, like I feel like I haven't really moved, but everybody else just keeps moving like in this way crazy other direction, and I almost don't know how to stop it. It's mind-blowing to me because I'm yet to hear counter arguments well laid out as to how this doesn't appropriate women, how this doesn't hurt women. And if it didn't, why are we trying to silence them and threaten them and tell them if you speak on like Riley Gaines saying that they literally lined up every athlete and told them, if you speak out about this, you will not get jobs, you will be labeled this for the rest of your life. They threatened them.
Right.
Like, you don't have to threaten people if you're doing the right thing.
Right.
And I think that should be enough right there,
Well, and I wish that I could bottle up what you just said and how you said it, because that could be, exactly the argument. If you need to silence people and there's no, you're not advocating like, literally harming somebody. If you're speaking out rationally and they're attempting to silence you, then that isn't actually fair debate.
Right.
And I'm with you. I have yet to have anyone, I've had one person in this entire time who tried to be really kind of rational with me in this conversation. And we went back and forth for, a few hours one night discussing like, I said, you are creating a marginalized group out of the ether, and that is not protected by law. And so you need to give more information on that if you're just creating this group. And he did attempt, to come back, but at the very end of it, it was just bigot, Nazi. And it's like, right. So, I mean, the reality of it is, I don't know what the push is. This is what I think. And again, just my kind of 2 cents on this. I think that young people, myself included, we really want, not now, at the time, want to feel like they're changing the course of history. And that's understandable. Like everyone wants to have an impact on history. And we want young people to want to have an impact on history. We don't want to be a stagnant, population. We want to be, we want to go down as people who evolved and learned and became better and knew more and discovered more. So I think that that is a natural impetus to want to be progressive in all categories. And then I think there's a little bit of retribution in play. I think the Me Too movement, and I hate to say this because I know women, it's a touchy subject all the way around, but I think Me Too, we finally got some pushback for what we'd, been subject to for most of our lives as women. Being kind of harassed regularly is from the time you're 12 years old, women, running in school, all the things, there's just an element of that. And it can be very nefarious, like we've seen, or it can just be the daily kind of like, hey, baby, sort of deal. So women finally had a moment with Me Too. And I think that some of this that we're seeing now is kind of retribution for that. Like, we'll show you, you all, there was some pushback back in the day with the women's rights movement where, we'll show you for standing up. And so what I'm hoping is this is temporary. I'm hoping that the women, the younger women, or even the middle-aged women who support this and think they're being kind, I hope they at some point can self-reflect and say, look, this isn't about being kind, and this is not about equality, and this is not a marginalized group that is somehow being, left out in the cold. This is about women being silenced, being marginalized, and having their very existence erased. Once we are now just vagina havers in medical literature, like, what else is there?
Yeah, that's crazy. That really is well said. And I had never thought about it from that angle of there's sort of a pushback to that. And you think if you even look back at civil rights, right? You had MLK, you had good things happening. There's always a blowback. There's always another group of people that does say, we will show you, we're not just going to settle for this, right? So that would make a little bit of sense to me as to why some of this is happening. Sort of will put you back in your place.
Right.
Yeah, that sort of makes sense to me. I appreciate that perspective. From your perspective, then what needs to happen? Like, should there be a third category, or should it just say you're not allowed to compete if you're biological male? Where would you fall on that?
Well, so I think the problem is many sports have included a third category. I mean, it's simple. It's like, we can avoid the problem. We can avoid the bigger debate about can men ever become women.
Yeah.
So they created a third category. Time and time again, they refuse to participate in the third category. There's no glory in being in a third category.
Yeah.
And so the third category just goes away, and we're back to the same problem. So if a third category solved this, if a third bathroom solved this, I'd be all for it, because back to our original, part of the conversation, I don't really care. It's like, whatever. I think the problem is, because I'm realizing through sort of being involved in this and studying this, it isn't just about self-expression. This isn't just a case of a person wants to express themselves a different way. It is about ownership and appropriation at the end of the day. These men need to own womanhood. They need to own the sports that are involved. They need to dominate the sports that are involved, and they need to have the spaces and whatever confirmation women get for being women. And a third category doesn't solve that for them, because now they're just a separate category. And that's not what they want. that's why the big push, the constant saying trans women are women. If society doesn't buy that, if society stops at trans women are trans women, then the appropriation is not fully complete. And so I don't, I'm fine with the third category. I'm fine with the third bathroom. It doesn't matter to me. They just will not partake in that. Then I don't know what you do.
Yeah, that makes sense too. That everything you said there makes sense. It seems to me after talking to you, it's just more of a power struggle than an actual, like sort of what we're seeing is the foot soldiers on the ground, but it seems like way more of a power struggle than that. And it's, I always tell people like my top 3 favorite athlete of all time is Serena Williams. I used to love watching her play. I love tennis. And I remember they were always trying to push her. Could you beat men? People would always ask her this question. And I remember she finally broke down one day. She's like, quit asking me. She goes, I couldn't score a point on the 300th ranked guy. I couldn't. I'd lose 6-0, 6-0, 6-0. And that takes nothing away from she is the greatest, in my opinion, female tennis player of all time. She was so fun to watch, dominant. You saw the USA women's team. I grew up watching them win gold. That iconic moment where Brandi Chastain like flexes after she scores the penalty kick. That was amazing. But look, we took the women's World Cup team and they got beat by an elite high school boys soccer team.
Right.
There's just biological. It doesn't, again, take anything away from the women's soccer team. They're amazing. They're fun to watch compete against other women on a level playing field. But it's not fun to watch a high school boys team go beat the best. It's not the same game. There's testosterone levels, bone density. There's just so many things, right, that we have to acknowledge about that. And I just hope people wake up. And I appreciate everything you're putting out there to hopefully wake up people to say, it doesn't mean you're unkind. We need things to be fair. We need things to be
right. Well, and again, I mean, I get a lot of pushback, but I am the mother of 2 sons. I don't have any daughters. This is not some huge, women need to dominate agenda. I've been married 32 years. I am fully supportive of men and, what they uniquely bring to the table. We are not taking away from men by asking that we have our own category in sport. I've been an athlete my entire life. I recognize that I would not be competing at the same level. So I was on 4 US teams. Every single team that I was on, which was over a decade, so 4 teams over a decade, we had 6 women and 6 men. And if you took their placing, like first ranked woman, second on the team, okay, because we were ranked, 1 through 6, there was through the entire decade, about a 15-point difference between the top man and the top woman, all the way down to 6 and 6. I didn't feel less successful as a female athlete because the man who was ranked at the same place I had about 15 miles on me for the 24 hours. I think that we're just looking at this incorrectly, that women asking for a fair category is the same thing as women either going against men, like, men, that's not what this is. This is saying women are unique. Women need unique spaces, like you referred to earlier, prisons, bathrooms. We should not allow 50-year-old men and 14-year-old girls changing room. That should not happen. Women's sports, women's safe spaces. It's rational to me. It is not hate. It is not discrimination. And this sort of agenda that it's like about hating men or, I don't get it. It's not that. It's recognizing the uniqueness of women and celebrating that and understanding that and protecting it from men who already have all their own stuff. They don't need our stuff too.
Right. Yeah, it seems very too logical, to be honest. And I don't understand why men would be threatened. I worry, and worry maybe not the right word, but I'm honestly surprised that no male like D3 level college basketball player hasn't gone and dominated the WNBA yet. I think it's a matter of time, right? Like before they'll get super famous, they'll be called a hero, they'll get $20 million of endorsements. Like it's only a matter of time. They'll get what?
They'll do a music video.
I mean, I think this stuff would come, and then I think it's not fun to watch. Like women's tennis to me is super. I've always been a tennis fan, and it's always been fun. But to go watch a biological male win 6-0, 6-0, 6-0 is not going to be fun. You'll literally erase the sport. And I think if we keep going this trajectory, it's a matter of time before we erase some of the women's sports. And I just think we got to stand up and do something about it, right?
Well, and I think that's inevitable. I mean, I think that if men are, if we go down this trajectory of men being allowed in women's sports, especially now that it's just self-identification. I mean, you don't even have to do anything. You just have to say, I want to compete in the women's team. I mean, we just won't have women's sports. Why would we? It costs a lot of money to have a male category and a female category at any race, So I think about things I've competed in. You have a male category and a female category, and there's prize money for the men, prize money for the women. Well, if you just mush those together, everything's significantly cheaper. The bibs are different colors, that kind of thing. Everything's cheaper. So if we don't push back, we just won't have a female category. And
then you're just back to it's pre-1971. You're back to sitting on the sidelines of just, well, maybe there's, like you said, one or two every high school that could come compete. Right. It's not the same, it's not fair.
Well, not only that, but how many girls are going to want to compete when it's only boys teams and they've got to be the outlier that joins the boys teams? Like, we need girl sports. They've shown girl sports are incredibly healthy and incredibly vital to a lot of young women's social, mental, physical development. And just getting rid of that. Not everybody is musical. Not everybody is math, good at math. So we need to protect this category. And that to me is kind of the biggest thing. I think that, I don't know if you follow John Pike. He's a scientist out of England, and he posts a lot on the science. And he wrote the other day that the women's sports issue is sort of the peak. It's the place of entry for so many people because people can see it. It's, we can see the difference. Whereas a lot of the other kind of side issues, people can't quite see the difference. They're like, well, why does it matter? But sport, we can see. The thing is that sport is the canary in the coal mine. Sport is the thing. If we let this go and we don't fight back, women are going to be erased. And so that's why I push so hard. It's like, I just thought that it was just about sport, and I'm seeing the downstream of all of those things.
Yeah, I think you're really wise to see that. And, you mentioned, I'm not a political person, to be honest. I don't like getting in this stuff. I'd rather just build people up all day and we all win and have a great life and things like that. But I do see this as a bottleneck issue. And I really appreciate you sharing a lot of wisdom and really making me better on the topic too. I really did a deep dive onto a lot of your stuff and really feel like I've grown a lot myself and better. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing. I gotta go here in a minute. I'm taking my kids to a lion habitat here this morning. But any last words for the people or any kind of ending words? You say so much common sense, and I appreciate it so much.
Well, no, I just really appreciate you weighing in on it, because I do think that we really need sort of a platform like yours that is commonsensical and that is just sort of trying to get to the bottom of this, because a lot of us who are in the trenches tend to get really focused on specific things of it, but it really is just a common sense issue. And so I appreciate you platforming women's sports and us trying to save that, because I really think in the long run, it's going to have a lasting impact on what happens going forward. And it's not a political issue. It's really not. It's just a fairness issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. Really well said. Well, thank you so much, Carilyn. You're an awesome woman. I appreciate it. You ever out in Vegas with your family, hit me up. All right.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
You guys go have the best day of your life. Be kind to others. Be kind to yourself. Use common sense and some logic. And maybe you heard some things today that you don't agree with necessarily. Think on those things. Talk. Have rational conversations with people. That's how we grow and learn. So you guys go have the greatest day of your life. Thanks again for tuning in.